Alright, welcome back to the Recipe Analyst. Today I'll be making rosemary cheddar cheese bread from King Arthur's Baker's Companion. But instead of rosemary, I'm going to be using sage because for some reason I bought sage instead of rosemary. So to start, I'm going to go ahead and butter up my muffin pan and the loaf pan. The recipe makes 2 loaves, but I only have 1 loaf pan. So I decided to try it in muffin cups instead. And the recipe calls for a half cup of softened butter and a half cup of melted butter. So I put the butter in the microwave for about a minute on 50% speed to soften up this half. And I'm gonna mix that in with this egg and the milk. But I did have an issue with softening the butter because my egg and milk were cold when I put the butter back into the milk and the egg. It just solidified, so it's very difficult to combine it. So I would probably go ahead and just melt it completely. I'm not sure why there's a difference, or just soften it to a point that it's warm and very soft, not just slightly soft. So now I'm going to mix the dry ingredients, so that's the baking powder, the salt, and the whole wheat flour, and you can use regular flour if you don't have whole wheat flour. And I'm gonna crumble in the sage, which should be rosemary, and I just used the air fryer to dehydrate it, and I think you could do the same thing for the rosemary. I'm gonna mix that together, and then I'll mix in the wet ingredients and all of this butter that's basically solid. I put it back in the microwave to soften up some more so it's easier to mix in. With all that added to the flour, I'm gonna mix it until it's combined, and then I'll go ahead and split it evenly, or as evenly as I can, between the loaf pan and the muffin cups. And being exact here isn't very important as long as you get about half in each, so that when it rises it doesn't go over once you add the other dough or batter. Now I'm grating the cheddar cheese, and this is a mild cheddar, and of course if you want it to be more cheesy you can use a sharp cheddar cheese. I'm going to put that to the side, and making this batter or dough is a lot like the other batter, and that starts off with you beating the egg, then you go ahead and add the milk, followed by the melted butter this time. And like I said, I feel like you can get away with completely melting the butter in the other batter as well. And now I'll mix the dry ingredients, so that's the baking powder, salt, cayenne, and black pepper. And then of course we're going to finish it off with the all-purpose flour. Give that a mix, and then I'll go ahead and add the cheddar cheese, mix that in, and once that's mixed together I can add the wet ingredients, the egg, milk, and butter, and just like the other batter, just mix it until it's combined. And once it's all combined and there's no more dry spots, you can split it just like you did the other batter. And before I marble the batters, I try to make the top level pretty even, and then I just drag my knife through it in a couple different directions, and I do the same thing with the muffin pan, and then I even out the tops again before I put it into the oven. So I baked these for about 50 minutes, and then I used a metal skewer to test them for doneness, but they look pretty done to me. They're pretty golden brown, but the skewer did come out clean, so they were done. Then I let them cool in the pans for about 15 minutes before I transfer them to a cooling rack. So what did I think of the rosemary cheddar cheese bread, which I accidentally made into sage cheddar cheese bread? So I'm going to start off with the texture. The texture is very good. Fresh out of the oven, there's a crisp exterior with a very soft and tender interior. As far as the flavors go, they're pretty light. There's a light spiciness. It's pretty buttery, but the cheese and the sage, while I can definitely tell that there's cheese and sage in there, it's just pretty mellow and light. It's not very sharp as far as the flavors go. I think it could use a little extra flavor, so that could just be a little extra salt potentially in the sage batter, and maybe just a sharper cheese in the cheese batter. With that being said, I decided to give this recipe a 7 out of 10. I think it would be a pretty good substitute for biscuits or cornbread as a side dish for a larger meal. Anyway, thanks for watching, and as always, if you want to read a more in-depth analysis, you can always go to therecipeanalyst.com. And if you have any recommendations for recipes you want me to try, let me know in the comments below. Thanks again for watching.